and the sheer power of the first few days of the Trump administration versus the last 4 years of the Biden administration is actually quite shocking.
It's still the same repetitive thing. Oh, did you see what he did? Did you see? They're all fascists.
Continuation of the feeling of disenfranchisement and the sickening feeling of status quo politicians.
Preaching so much truth, you turn into Jesus in the middle of it. You're like, how do you play
The Halo game.
Well, obviously, the biggest thing that happened was the U.S. election and Trump being in office, and the whole controversy with Elon Musk and his salute. He told people they're in his heart in a very special way, just showing people love and just giving that alien love to everyone.
spreading that Aryan love.
But seriously, what do you think of it? I'm interested to know because I suspect you don't just regurgitate whatever you've like 5-second clips you've seen or whatever you've had, and you have a unique view. I'm just putting you on pedestal. So now anything you say might feel underwhelming.
Listen, for those of them that don't know, I mean, this is going to go out and maybe one viewer is going to watch it. It's probably going to be yours truly. But for those people who don't know, I actually wasn't a supporter of Trump. But in the first electoral season of the Trump campaign, I was one of the people who were saying, this guy's going to win. This guy is speaking to a base that you guys don't see yet. I'm not trying to say I'm oracular or prescient or I know more than all of you or other people or my opinion is any more informed than anyone else's. But I could see the political tapestry and the landscape was in a perfect alignment for a far-right character like Trump to be elected. And everyone labeled me a fascist, bigot, right-wing idiot, especially because of other voting patterns that I partook in that we're not going to discuss here right now. It's not that time. But when I saw...
when I hope that you were in the Nazi rally as well. That you were.
Stop. But no, back then, in the first Trump administration...
He was never...
We're going to get fucking cancelled episode 1, bro. No, actually, this is Trump world, baby. There's no cancelling anymore. Just remember that, okay? Anyway, back in the first administration, I greeted Trump not with alacrity, but with a breath of fresh air for something different, something new. It was more out of boredom of the status quo that I said this man could win. I'm not going to say I read the tea leaves, but I could definitely see that there was a certain disgruntled, disemboweled, disillusioned, disenfranchised element of the world and indeed America that would have made the election of someone like Trump saying all of that populist bile highly electable. Fast forward to where we are now. MAGA has been going on for about 8 years now, even in the Biden administration. It's been happening behind the scenes, and you could argue that MAGA, many of the objectives were already met. But the re-election of Donald Trump, for me, is that continuation of the feeling of disenfranchisement and the sickening feeling of status quo politicians, career politicians who have nothing to do with the real world, not saying that Donald Trump is the real world, but who don't come from any lineage of business, who don't come from any walks of life that most of their voters come from, and someone that they can see who speaks not truth to power, but at least says what he's feeling, however contrived or cynical that may be. Now, obviously, this administration, I think Trump has learned a lot from the mistakes of his past administration. He was a rookie at presidency, and no amount of apprentice America, no amount of business acumen, and no amount of fraternizing with billionaires is going to prepare you for the responsibilities of that office of state, which is indeed the most powerful office in the world. His first administration, I don't think he was prepared. I don't think he had at his arsenal and disposal the unilateral power of the Senate and the Congress and such a mandate that allows him to pursue MAGA in the way that he's going to pursue it. So fast forward now to where we are, where you saw the inauguration speech, which is basically like a blitzkrieg. just absolutely dissing all Democrats, absolutely dissing anyone that's actually the base of MAGA. There were none of those representatives. It was all like a cadre of billionaires. Fast forward to what we're seeing is an unholy combination of state and big business. And I really do believe that the next 4 years are actually going to make America great again. I really do. It might even make America sexy and skinny again, which is an unfortunate acronym because it stands for MASA, which my people don't really like the sound of. But I do believe MAGA is going to be reincarnated in a guise in such power, in such unbelievable tenacity and force that the world has not seen before. And in a weird way, the politics of Trump and the man of Trump himself doesn't resonate with me, but seeing a politician use all of the heft, the force, the kinetic energy and the machismo of that power, that state of office, is quite inspiring for me. And I'm interested to see in the next 4 years what he can actually achieve.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised by your answer because it's quite similar to what I would have said. But not in 2017. I was one of those who was very much against Trump, and I did a couple of videos on him as well, like his constant lies, and it's not like it's not true. But I think there is the issue is deep lying issues. There's a big hypocrisy in politics, which is very cliche to say, but he just haven't got the decorum, and the other politicians have the decorum, and sometimes he actually does some good things because it comes from a populist view, and I don't know, he, as you say, he's got the energy that other politicians don't have because they're always careful about their vote. But he doesn't care. He just brought, like, all the rule books are out of the window, and he still won. And but the deep, what you mentioned regarding the like people ignoring the base, I think it's that's what's very disappointing with what I see with the whole Nazi salute, the allegedly Nazi salute. That it's still the same repetitive thing. Oh, did you see what he did? Did you see? They're all fascists. They're all, and like going to the marches and saying, like, oh, this guy doesn't know like what interest rate is. This guy doesn't know who was the president like in 2004. They were so stupid. That's not going to lead to anywhere. They're going to get the same thing. When I first came to UK, like I started watching politics by watching Bill Maher, like back in 2005, 6. And what was surprising for me was that the Southerners and like the Midwest were always the butt of the joke. They're stupid. Oh, the rednecks. And I'm like, well, they're just going to they're going to bite back at some point. Like, you can't just dismiss like the needs of millions of people, but just calling them stupid or fascist. They're still there, and they have votes, and they know how to vote. If one thing they can do is just go to the poll and vote, they might not have the education, they might not have, but they can get up on the day of voting and go to the vote, or go to marches and go to rallies, and they're passionate because there's someone actually who, no matter if he stays with the promises or not, he actually gives them value. He doesn't just dismiss them and say like, hey, you're not allowed to talk. And that has, worked. I think it started first with Tea Party, but this has now changed to what we have now. And what worries me is that, there is no self-reflection in the liberal and the left, and they're still doing the same thing, doing the comedy shows of going, doing pieces and laughing. But it's just the loser mentality as well. You're just waiting to give a reaction to what now Elon Musk does, to what Trump does. You're not the one taking the initiative. You're the one that is just on the side and just saying, oh, look what they're doing to the country. But and I think the main issue is the education system in US. You're a teacher yourself, and I think it has failed people for generations after generations, and it hasn't and the values that was promoted during 2000s, 1990s, 90s, 80s, maybe it wasn't like what the Chinese value, what the Indians value, what like education is very important. But whereas being a nerd was a bad thing back when we were growing up, but now nerds are ruling everyone. And I think part of it is that I'm losing track of my thought now, jumping anytime you want.
Well, I mean, just the point on nerds, right? Nerds are the new job. Nerds are running the show in America. And there's a whole crisis of a lack of skills in America and indeed throughout the wider world. And you have a whole issue with the H-1B1 visas because there's such a lack of domestic intelligence in America and all over the world that Indians and Chinese and Koreans, but hundreds of thousands of these, savorable, salubrious immigrants are being brought over to fill those skill gaps that on one hand, the base is decrying, but on the other hand, big business like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they really need them to fill those software engineering jobs, those cloud architecture jobs, those security and cyber internet and security jobs. And it just doesn't it's not a congregant idea with what Trump and his base actually want. Now, you touched on something about the left and the liberal movement being just totally apathetic, ambivalent, and just kind of impotent in a way. When I saw the inauguration and I looked at the left, Kamala Harris, Biden, Obama, Clinton, Hillary and Bill, they were all there. And it was so interesting to look at their sarcastic responses to what he was saying, Trump, in his inauguration. It wasn't something that was rooted in thinking, how do we appeal to this base again? How do we make ourselves more palatable? How do we become more introspective, more reflective, and win this electoral landscape in the next election? What they did, like you rightly said, was they went back to that old playbook of the deplorables. Obama said, "You're not black if you don't vote for Kamala." They patronized an entire voter and they took them for granted, just like the Democratic Party had been taking Hispanics, blacks, and the female vote for granted for decades. They just immediately assumed we don't have to try and win this vote. We don't have to address your problems, your grassroots issues, the diminishing of the Rust Belt, the domestic America's jobs being taken, the widening gap of inequality. We don't have to focus on that. What we're going to do is we're going to pander to wokeism. We're going to try and solve all of these ills and address and make ourselves more politically palatable by being the flag bearer for wokeism, rather than looking at what the Republicans are looking at, which is cutting the waste, increasing business opportunities, increasing America's power, decreasing domestic intervention in wars, which is not what you traditionally associate with the Republican Party. But the Republican Party, although they might lack the decorum, I think they're speaking to what many, many people feel, which is an absolute suffocation with wokeism, with liberal policies, which haven't really done much to further the average man's wealth, status, happiness, or health. What they've done is they've focused on niche issues that are almost virtue signaled to the extent where they don't have to focus on anything else. They've pinned their colors to these esoteric and ununderstandable ideas in a way to become more palatable and relevant to where they think this neoliberalism is moving. And it's a real shame because it's not just an anomaly. You see it all over the world, moving to the right in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and now in America. It's not a coincidence that it's on the tailwind of decades of neoliberalism and all of these policies that have literally shifted focus away from industrial strength, domestic manufacturing, empowering the base at home. It's no coincidence that now populism is taking root everywhere over the planet. And me personally, I just like the possibility of something different. There's nothing more anathema to me than a career politician, someone who has been a politician their entire life, become the Minister of Education, become the Minister of Finance, become a Treasury Secretary without ever walking in those moccasins. for one day of their life. So to see the greats of business, to see the greats of academia, to see the greats of and titans of industry and these careers go into these offices and assume these offices, for me, it's refreshing. And I'm excited to see what's going on in the next few years. Is it going to be good for the people? Probably not. Because let's be honest, the only thing that Donald Trump cares about is the color green. And whether that makes him like, I don't know, a good guy is another question entirely. And hopefully it trickles down from the billionaires to the plebs below. But hey, at this point, the reason he won is why I am excited about it. It represents change, it represents something different from the status quo, and it represents a real alternative.
Okay, I got a couple of questions for you. Well, first, one thing I would say is with the politics with Trump, whatever it might be, I think people in US, like at least his supporters, feel like they're involved with it. They are part of the conversation. They're doing something together. Like, I've never seen someone sign executive orders and having a chat with journalists as well. And like he's having a simple chat. He's not using any like politics speak. And that just and he's not apologetic about being US first. Whatever it might mean, but he's like, he's being tough on other countries for better or worse. But he's like saying, "Oh, I care for US first." He might not actually care, but that's the vibe he's giving. He's like saying, like, we are back in business. We are here, and like we are the big boy here, and you guys got to follow our rules. It doesn't, and. It resonates.
Isn't that what you want from your politician? Isn't that what we should all want from our politicians?
Yeah.
To think about us first, to put our needs first, and to elevate their own countries. Me personally, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, maybe there's a nicer way to go about it, but
I mean, it works with US because they are the biggest.
They can do it.
Country.
You don't have like Bangladesh saying, "Make Bangladesh great again. We're going to go and conquer Greenland." It's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, but I mean, but in another way, looking at it, it's like, does it mean the decline of US that you have to resort to muscle, actually, like to threats? Is that the part of the decline of US? That was my question.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Is it the last breath that you're actually now threatening your allies or build threats like to get more out of them because you're not having enough? It's like a king that taxes more, start taxing the subjects more because they can't afford the lifestyle.
I think there's a few answers to that. One of those answers is that optically, it's great rhetoric for Donald Trump and his base. It works for him. That projection of power. It could all be bluster. It could all be bluffing from the king of negotiations, the king of the deal, just to say these things are going to happen in order for him to get a better price point or a better outcome without even having to fire a bullet, metaphorical or literal. It could be that. Or it could be, like you say, the dying embers of an empire. It could be what one philosopher and economist called the Thucydidean trap, which is what all dying empires go through in the last episodes before they collapse. The British Empire went through it, the Roman Empire went through it, the Ottoman Empire went through it, where we see huge expansion beyond the realm of administrative possibility to be able to control it. You see the debasement of currency, and then finally you see outlandish, nonsensical adventures abroad in terms of conquest that don't really make sense. It's called the Thucydidean's trap, and it's happened in every single empire. It could be that, but I think you touched on a really good point. When you're the global hegemon, when you're the global power base, things that seem fantastical and incredulous actually are quite possible. When you spend 40 cents of every dollar on defense procurement, advanced weaponry, and projecting power abroad, those kinds of things are possible. Talking about taking the Panama Canal back, they did it already. It's not like it's the first time they've done it. It's happened before. They built it, 35,000 people died. Not all of them were American, by the way, although they won't tell you that. That's the truth. Canada is in terminal decline. And to be honest with you, if you actually look at why, it's because of their over-welcoming stance on immigration and their unorthodox monetary policies and fiscal policies. You also see Greenland. Trump is hitting on something quite important there. As global warming opens up those pathways in the Arctic Ocean, you don't have absence of superpowers trying to fill that vacuum. It's a national security imperative, not just in terms of where it is on the planet, but also in rare earth mineral capabilities of mining. China and Russia are exploiting the Arctic. So I understand why he wants to go into that area. Now, whether or not it's the dying embers of an empire, which was your original question, it could be. But I don't think we're going to be talking about American decline for until the next, way beyond way after, we'll probably start talking about that once we're gone. They're in such a hegemonic position now. They have the global reserve currency. They have the largest military. They control 25% of the world's trade, but yet 75% of the world's trade is settled in dollars. They have the reserve currency, which is arguably their most powerful weapon. And they have something that Warren Buffett quoted, never bet against America. No matter how much you hate America, in their 200-year history, they've never failed to come back from being hit down. They are exceptional in certain ways. And you can see that in their economic data. You can see that in the fact that they have all of the big companies, all of them being the tech companies, zero in Europe. And now you can see it in the divide emerging between the prospects of Gen Z and millennials in Europe vis-a-vis the prospects of Gen Z and millennials in America. Gen Zs in America are higher up on the property ladder. Their disposable income is way higher. Their overall rated happiness is higher compared to the Gen Z and millennials in Europe. So if you're going to talk about American decline, you have to think about comparative and relative decline elsewhere, because there's demographic decline going on in Asia, and there's democratic decline going on in Europe in terms of the far-right movements in Germany, France, arguably England. So is America declining? I don't think it is. I think it's exceptional. And everything's showing that at the moment.
Okay. No, that was a very good answer. I got one last question. I think we can wrap this up. It's I don't know how much we spoke, but this was actually a surprising, very good conversation. Just to end it with a very simple question, how would you define, if you want to use a few words, a few moments that you remember from Biden administration, and then from the first term of Trump, what would be the three moments that you remember, or three conflicts that you remember, how would you associate it? The Biden administration and then the Trump administration?
I think it's a great question, because I actually feel as though Biden has got a raw deal. Biden has been a titan of politics for decades. 5 decades, that man has dedicated his life to the political arena in America. And many people don't realize the pivotal legislation that Biden has actually got through. It's been overshadowed by his mental decline, which is apparent and obvious and self-evident. And it's been overshadowed by the bombastic rhetoric of Trump, which, let's be honest, even the most adroit political orator would struggle to combat. You could be an Obama and you still struggle to combat Trump's bombastic rhetoric. But if I had to remember Biden in a favorable light, I would go historically and more contemporary. Historically, I mean, the man had great tragedies in his life, losing children in car crashes, fatalities, and he bounced back from that. I mean, you have to admire his tenacity. You have to admire his longevity in office. However, contemporarily, Biden actually got through the CHIPS Act. He got through the Great Inflation Reduction Act. He helped Ukraine. I mean, argue whichever side you're on, he did defend NATO, well, not a NATO ally, but a democratic sovereign state from an aggressor. But I think if you were to judge him, he'd be judged on his last victory, which wasn't very great. If you just contrast the momentum and the sheer power of the first few days of the Trump administration versus the last 4 years of the Biden administration, it's actually quite shocking. Donald Trump achieved more in 4 days of office than Biden did in 4 years of office. And unfortunately, Biden's legacy is going to be forever marred by his last throes of power, which were to pardon his whole family, which, I mean, I think that calls into constitutional precedence in terms of presidential pardons, which is going to be remembered in a bad way. He also arguably lost the White House for the Democrats and the Senate and the House of Representatives. So he's going to be judged woefully for that. But in comparison to Trump, I think, unfortunately, Biden is going to just be a footnote in the story of Trump. And that's how he's going to be remembered.
Yeah, I sort of agree. Well, I was talking about also the first term of Trump. Like, how would you describe it? But I meant in like fewer words. But what I would say is, with Biden, I would remember the Israeli-Gaza conflict. I remember Ukraine war, and I remember his mental decline and uncertainty during the 4 years. A lot of conflicts, a lot of war. Trump, also, even though he was very bombastic, I remember Wall Street booming, just going up and up. I remember coronavirus, and I remember Abraham Accord, actually being quite a peaceful time during. And it might not be fair on Biden, but that's how I think it will be remembered. And that's a good. I think point to end this on. If you don't have anything else,
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. We should do this every week.
And by the way, you were preaching so much truth. You turned into Jesus in middle of it. You got like half of your face.
The Halo game. It's not planned. I swear. It's divine. It's divine providence.
Yeah, it's divine intervention. Trump is God's plan for America. Hallelujah.
Trump is looking down on me. Trump is looking down. Wait, before I go, did you see that ridiculous reverend in the inauguration?
Oh my God, that was like, even Trump was like,
what was that? Was that the black vote? Was that the black vote right there, Ashkar?
Oh my God, that was. But the thing is, he's selling crypto as well now.
The day after, he was like, Jesus, I want to thank you. Please, let's make everything I said happen. Here's my Lorenzo coin. Yeah. I mean, maybe you can say that's American exceptionalism. That's why America's great. That's why America's great, baby. The combination of God and capital. That's why America's great.
Everything's too big in America. You gotta worship God bigly. With crypto, perfectly.
Donate to God straight through my Cash app. Oh, man.